straight from the factory, the GM LS platform is a pretty stout one. On the other hand, it's also possible to spend an arbitrary amount of money on a race block if you really want to. Somewhere, though, there's a sweet spot, and I'm in search of that today. I'm here at ERL. I've got Jeff Liebert, and I want to find out more about what ERL can do to the GM platform to make it better for all purposes for high performance.
Okay, Paul, what we're doing is taking the factory block and we are making cylinders liners, replacing the factory cast iron liner with a ductile iron. We do two versions of that. We do a dry sleeve, which just replaces the factory sleeve and keeps the block architecture. And on the superdeck 1, we are actually adding reinforcement trusses between the cylinders, which handles the torque of the motor as well as the motor mount and any twist that comes into it that's generated.
Now, you talked about ductile iron. How is that different from the factory material?
The factory uses a cast iron, which is very rigid, but in strength it's about a third to a fourth of what a ductile iron sleeve is. So the material upgrade makes it about 4 times what the factory is.
Now, a lot of guys, when they're building an LS engine, they're going to want to run with a longer stroke, and you can run into problems with a stock factory liner, correct?
That's correct. The factory liners are short from the factory, anywhere from 5.5 to maybe 5.6 inches long. And then when you run a longer stroke, you can run into a lot of piston rock at the bottom dead center, which leads to oil consumption and can wear the skirts on the pistons themselves. So what we're doing is adding length to that to 5.8 inches, which works so it's very popular 4-inch stroke cranks.
It just sounds like a really good way to make sure that you're not going to have any issues in the future with an engine where you're running that long stroke crank. Now, for the super deck, how does that improve on the basic design of the cylinder sleeve? I know that you do a lot of different stuff to the actual block, far more than just re-sleeving.
That's correct. We actually go in and add a truss system that goes between the Siamese portion of each cylinder, and what that does is takes that torque and twist and transmits it between the liners, as well as stiffening the outer cylinder wall. When you have the outer cylinder wall and you do a wet sleeve, which the super deck is, you can take away a lot of the strength where the motor mount and the block attaches, and that can add to distortion in your cylinder deck. So that's why we're adding the truss. And also one of the big benefits is we can control the water flow now to the Siamese portion of the cylinder.
Well, it sounds like a really well-engineered system, and I see that you're also extending this now to the new LT1 architecture as well.
That's correct. We just recently did a dry sleeve, which is fairly simple since the box architecture is nearly the same. And we've also got a superdeck 1 version where we do the heavier wet sleeve, and we're doing a 6-bolt pattern to it because the cylinder heads are currently in the works, and won't be long guys will be pushing the LT1s at that point.
Well, that's awesome, and it's great that there was enough commonality between the two designs that, all the lessons you learned with the Gen 3 and Gen 4 are being able to be applied to this new generation.
That's correct. They've made some subtle changes, but as far as we're concerned, there weren't that many differences in the block structure, and you're going to have the same issues that we saw in the LS, so we've kind of already been there and worked and solved those problems.
Okay, well, the chalk talk theory is all well and good, but we got a guy here who can give us a little real-world experience with these blocks. Who are we going to talk to?
This is Mark Koehler. He's with the Ohio Boys Racing Team, and we've used him for multiple years for the test bed for a lot of our products. They get our initial new stuff and kind of call them our guinea pigs, and they've worked quite well with it, and they certainly do a fair amount of racing, so we get a good feedback from them.
All right, Mark, so what are you running these blocks in?
Well, right now I'm running a twin turbocharged 2000 Firebird. Looks like a Trans Am though. So it's pretty much a stock bodied, full stock bodied car. We're running drag radial classes.
Now, what are you doing for a power adder?
Two 88 millimeter turbos, putting as much boost in it as we can. As Jeff said, we try to field test everything that they make.
Now, when you're leaning on it that hard, I mean, what are the typical ways that a stock LS block would fail?
You can see about anything. Pistons are pretty hard to keep in check if you don't keep the temperatures in check, obviously with a turbocharged application, so we run intercoolers, keep the air cool. But you can fail about any part when you're putting enough power to it.
So now, I'm assuming that you're running the superdeck.
Yes, this past 2 years actually, we've been running the superdeck system.
Any problems with that? Any?
No, it's been actually fantastic. In fact, one of the things that ERL has done over the years with us as a team is we've basically engineered as we went. And they've been fantastic with any issues we see at the end of a season, during a season. We have ideas, they have ideas, we brainstorm, and Jeff usually takes it and thinks about it, sleeps on it for a couple weeks, and comes up with some fantastic ideas to make things better. And quite frankly, from the very beginning of time, when 1,000 horsepower was something to be done, we're probably pushing 2,500 now, reliably, and that's the big key.
But now you see 1,000 horsepower street cars all the time, and it's really amazing what this platform has grown into and let racers and street enthusiasts support in terms of horsepower. But of course, horsepower that's not applied to the ground doesn't do you any good. What kind of numbers are you running?
Well, ideally, if you've got good conditions, you can, we run a lot of 8th mile now due to safety. That's where the whole classes went. But normally we're in the mid 450 range and trying to get down below that. At this point, a lot of competition, so we got to get below that. But mid 450s at 170 to 175 miles an hour is where we've been. That would equate to in the 670 range at 215, 220 in the quarter mile for those who don't know 8th mile racing. So it's quite a bit. Like you said, you got to get the power down to the ground. That's the trick.
Well, I got to say that's really moving out. Now we've got some new plans for 2016.
Yeah, actually, I have a teammate. There's 2 of us, and he's not here today, but he's debuting a new car, doing an unfortunate incident last year with a wreck. So that was not a good part of our season last year, but it's going to translate into a pretty neat project where we're going to have a second car out now that's different than what we've had before. It'll be a 5th-gen Camaro, and we're looking forward to getting that together and out. My car will stay the same, and we do have some new platform stuff we're working on with Jeff here. It's all a little bit top secret, but we're going to make a few changes, both for performance and reliability. So, but that's been the trick every year is to step up to the next level. It's very hard to keep up with everybody. It's a very competitive environment.
And I'm sure that once you've learned these lessons, they're going to make their way into the product so that we can see that those advantages for those of us running these products on the street.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we've helped develop is back when it was normal to have 700-800 horsepower on the street, we were running a 1,500 horsepower setup. We'd fix any issues through the course of the season, and they would actually translate some of those fixes and some of those changes to allow to pass that along to the street group and in the mild racing group.
Well, it's really cool to see that racing technology trickle down into what we can use on the street. For Power Automedia, I'm Paul Huizinga. Thanks for joining us here at ERL. It's the 2015 PRI show. Keep it right here. We got a whole bunch more coming at you.